Welcome to the Warriors Haven podcast, the place where discipline meets purpose and everyday people become unstoppable. I'm your host, Jaisha Sutherland, a retired Army drill sergeant, single mom, and the founder of the Warriors Haven. Around here, we talk fitness, mindset, and the mission of building a stronger you, mentally, physically, and financially. Because this isn't just about the gym. It's about life, leadership, and living on your terms. So gear up, lock in, and let's step into the haven where warriors are made. What's going on, warriors? Welcome back to the Warriors Haven podcast. I'm your favorite drill sergeant, Jay, and today I want to challenge a belief you've probably carried your entire life without ever questioning it. You've heard it since you were a kid. Get comfortable. You deserve a break. Take it easy. Life is supposed to be comfortable. It sounds harmless. It even sounds healthy. But what if I told you that one of the biggest lies ever sold to humanity wasn't about money? It wasn't about success. It wasn't about happiness. It was about comfort. Because here's what I've learned after serving in the military, coaching thousands of people, rebuilding my own life after leaving the Army, and studying the science behind human performance. Comfort doesn't usually destroy you overnight. It seduces you one decision at a time. It convinces you that tomorrow is a better day to start. It whispers that missing one workout won't matter, that scrolling another 20 minutes won't hurt, that ordering takeout again is okay, that you'll finally launch that business when life slows down, that you'll chase your dream after the kids grow up, after work gets easier, after you have more money, after next Monday. Comfort rarely screams. It whispers. And because it whispers, most people never realize it's stealing their future. Let's talk about a prison that nobody sees. Imagine walking into a prison. You'd expect bars, locked doors, security guards, concrete walls. But the most dangerous prison in the world has none of those things. It's climate controlled. It has Netflix, DoorDash, a comfortable couch, high-speed Wi-Fi, unlimited entertainment. And because the prison feels good, nobody tries to escape. Think about that. For the first time in human history, we have access to almost unlimited comfort. If you're hungry, food arrives at your front door. If you're bored, millions of videos are waiting. If you're lonely, you open social media. If you don't want to think, algorithms will think for you. If you don't want to move, technology moves around you. Human history has never looked like this. And your brain wasn't designed for it. Our brains are about 200,000 years old, but our world is about 20 years old. That's a problem. Researchers who study evolutionary neuroscience often remind us that the modern environment has changed much faster than the human brain has evolved. For nearly all of human history, survival depended on effort. You had to hunt, gather food, build shelter, protect your family, walk miles every single day. Your brain developed one primary objective: save energy, because energy meant survival. If food was scarce, burning unnecessary calories could literally kill you. So your brain evolved an efficiency system. Today, we call it comfort. The problem? Your brain still believes it's trying to survive an ice age, but instead, it's surviving Amazon Prime. See the difference? Here's something that shocked me when I first learned it. Your brain has never made it its mission to help you become successful. Let me say that again. Your brain is not designed to help you become extraordinary. Its first responsibility is keeping you alive. That's it. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as a prediction machine. Its job is constantly asking one question: what's the safest thing I can do next? Not, what's the bravest thing? Not, what's the most meaningful thing? Not, what's going to help me become the person I want to be? Safety, predictability, efficiency. That's what it prioritizes. That's why starting something new feels uncomfortable, because your brain hasn't categorized it as safe yet. It's unfamiliar. Uncertainty requires energy. Learning requires energy. Changing habits require energy. And your brain naturally resists spending energy unless there's a compelling reason. That isn't weakness. That's biology. Have you ever noticed something? You finally sit down after a long day. You grab your phone. You tell yourself, I'm just going to check one thing. 45 minutes disappear. Sound familiar? That wasn't because you're lazy. Something fascinating happened inside your brain. Researchers studying attention and reward have found that small, unpredictable rewards like a funny video, a new message, or an interesting post can keep us engaged far longer than we intend. Your brain learns, this feels easy. This feels rewarding. Let's do it again. Over time, those repeated patterns become automatic. Not because you're broken, because your brain is efficient. The more often you repeat a behavior, the less conscious effort it takes to do it. That's one of the most incredible strengths of the human brain. But it also explains why unhealthy habits can become so deeply ingrained. Here's where things get dangerous. Most people think big failures ruin lives. They don't. Tiny repeated comforts do. Skipping today's workout doesn't change your life. Skipping 200 does. Eating one unhealthy meal doesn't matter much. Repeating it every day does. Ignoring one difficult conversation isn't catastrophic. Avoiding every difficult conversation changes who you become. Comfort isn't one decision. It's a pattern. Patterns become habits. Habits become identity. Identity becomes destiny. That's why discipline matters so much. Not because discipline is about punishment, because discipline interrupts the automatic patterns that comfort quietly builds. One of the most important ideas in neuroscience is that the brain constantly predicts what's going to happen next. When your day follows the same routine, your brain becomes incredibly efficient. That's useful when the routine supports your goals. It's a problem when the routine keeps you stuck, because your brain often prefers a familiar struggle over an unfamiliar opportunity. Think about that. Many people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, financial habits that keep them stressed. Not because they enjoy suffering, because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Your brain interprets the known as less threatening, even when it isn't serving you. That's why change can feel uncomfortable long before it becomes rewarding. One lesson I learned on the trail has stayed with me forever. Recruits would arrive believing confidence came first. They thought they needed to feel ready before they could perform. That's not how transformation works. Nobody showed up already confident. They became confident because they kept doing hard things. One obstacle, one march, one challenge, one uncomfortable conversation, one early morning, one moment of choosing action over excuses. That's how confidence is built. Not by waiting until fear disappears. By proving to yourself over and over again that you can move while fear is still sitting in the passenger seat. And that's true whether you're in uniform or building a business, raising a family, or trying to reclaim your health. Confidence isn't the prerequisite, it's the result. When we come back, we're going to go even deeper. I'm going to explain why your brain literally changes when you embrace voluntary discomfort, what researchers have discovered about neuroplasticity, why elite performers train differently than everyone else, and how modern comfort may be quietly shrinking your potential without you even realizing it. Because once you understand what's happening inside your brain, you'll never look at comfort the same way. Welcome back, warriors. Before the break, we talked about something that most people never realized. Your brain isn't trying to make you successful. It's trying to keep you alive. And sometimes those are two completely different goals. Because the same brain that once protected your ancestors from starving in the wilderness is now trying to protect you from something much smaller: discomfort. But here's where the story gets interesting. Your brain is far more adaptable than most people realize. Scientists call this neuroplasticity. And if you've ever heard that word before, don't worry. Let's make it simple. Imagine your brain is like a hiking trail through the woods. The first time you walk through thick brush, it's difficult. You have to push branches aside. You trip over roots. You aren't sure where you're going. But every time you walk that same path again, it becomes a little easier. Eventually, what was once a rough trail becomes a smooth road. Your brain works in much the same way. The more often you think a thought, the more often you repeat a behavior, the stronger those neural pathways become. This is one of the greatest discoveries in modern neuroscience, supported by decades of research from places like Harvard University, Stanford University, and University College London. Researchers have repeatedly shown that repeated behaviors physically strengthen the neurocircuits associated with those behaviors. Now, think about that for a second. If you repeatedly choose comfort, you're not just creating a habit, you're building a highway in your brain that makes comfort your default setting. And every time you choose discipline instead, you're building a different highway, one that gets easier to travel the more often you use it. That's why the first workout feels hard. The first sales call feels awkward. The first podcast feels terrifying. The first time you wake up at 5 a.m. feels impossible. Not because you're incapable, because you're cutting a brand new trail through the forest. Here's something fascinating that neuroscientists like Dr. Andrew Huberman often explain. Many people think dopamine is the feel-good chemical. It's not. Dopamine is better understood as a motivation and anticipation molecule. It helps drive you toward what your brain predicts to be rewarding. Now, here's the problem. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between what's immediately rewarding and what's ultimately meaningful. Scrolling social media, immediate reward. Eating a bag of chips, immediate reward. Watching another episode, immediate reward. Avoiding a difficult conversation, immediate relief. Your brain notices that relief and it remembers it. The next time you're uncomfortable, it gently nudges you back towards the same escape, not because it's trying to sabotage you, because it's trying to repeat what previously reduced stress. That's how comfort becomes a cycle, not through one giant decision, but through thousands of tiny reinforcements. One of the most influential neuroscientists today, Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, describes the brain as a prediction engine. Your brain isn't simply reacting to life. It's constantly trying to predict what's about to happen based on your past experiences. That means your past doesn't just influence your memories. It influences your future decisions. If every time life got difficult, you escaped into distraction, your brain starts predicting that distraction is the solution. If every time you feel anxious, you quit, your brain learns that quitting reduces discomfort. If every time something challenged your identity, you backed away, eventually your brain begins offering retreat before you even consciously make a decision. Think about how powerful that is. Your future isn't always determined by your circumstances. Sometimes it's determined by the predictions your brain has learned to make. The good news? Predictions can be rewritten, but they can only be rewritten through new experiences. You can't think your way into courage. You have to practice it. This next idea changed the way I look at life. For years, we've been told that stress is always bad. Avoid stress. Reduce stress. Eliminate stress. But that's only half the story. Research from doctors at Stanford University suggests that how we interpret stress can dramatically influence how our bodies respond to it. Stress itself isn't always harmful. Chronic, unmanaged stress is. But short periods of intentional challenge, those can actually strengthen us. Think about the gym. When you lift a weight, you're creating tiny tears in your muscle fibers. That sounds bad, but those tiny tears trigger repair. Repair leads to growth. Your muscles become stronger because they were challenged. The brain works similarly. Learning something difficult, having uncomfortable conversations, taking calculated risks, public speaking, starting a business. These experiences demand more from your brain. And when your brain rises to meet those demands, it adapts. Growth isn't the absence of stress. Growth is the result of recovering from the right kind of stress. Have you ever wondered why elite athletes keep training even after they've won championships? Why Navy SEALs continue pushing themselves long after they could stop? Why successful entrepreneurs willingly tackle bigger problems instead of coasting? It's because they've learned something most people haven't. Comfort doesn't build capacity. Challenge does. Psychologists call this the principle of desirable difficulty. When a task is just hard enough to stretch you, but not so overwhelmingly that it breaks you, your brain learns faster and retains more. This principle has been demonstrated across education, skill acquisition, and performance science. Think about learning to ride a bike. You fell, you wobbled, you got frustrated. But those mistakes weren't evidence of failure. They were evidence that your brain was learning. Now imagine if someone had said, "You know what? This is uncomfortable. Let's stop." You probably never would have learned to ride. Yet, as adults, we often treat emotional discomfort as a stop sign instead of a signal that learning is happening. I want to introduce you to a phrase I would use with many of my coaching clients: the comfort tax. Every comfortable decision has a hidden cost. You may not pay it today, but eventually the bill arrives. You skip the workout today, months later, you pay with lower energy. You avoid investing in yourself. Years later, you pay with missed opportunities. You postpone difficult conversations. Eventually, you pay with broken relationships. You avoid taking the chance. One day, you pay with regret. Comfort always sends an invoice. It just waits until you've forgotten what you purchased. Let's zoom out. Imagine two versions of your life. In one life, you choose the easier option every single day. You sleep in, you avoid hard conversations, you never risk failure. You stay where it's familiar. It feels good in the moment, but 10 years later, you might wake up wondering where your confidence went, where your ambition went, where your health went, where your dreams went. Now imagine another life, one where you constantly choose small moments of discomfort. You speak up, you move your body, you learn new skills, you keep promises to yourself. You don't become extraordinary overnight, but over time, something incredible happens. You begin trusting yourself. And once you trust yourself, everything changes. In this next section, we're going to cover one of the biggest myths about happiness, explore why modern convenience is quietly making us mentally weaker, and reveal how you can intentionally train your brain to crave growth instead of comfort. Then we'll transition into today's mid-roll before diving into part 2, where I'll give you 3 neuroscience-backed strategies you can put into practice the moment this episode ends. Because warriors, you don't become who you're meant to be by avoiding discomfort. You become who you're meant to be by walking straight through it. All right. Hey, friends, I want you to do something for me. If you are not driving, please close your eyes for a second. Picture yourself standing at a fork in the road. The path to your left is smooth. It's paved. There are benches along the way. It's shaded. It feels safe. There are plenty of people walking beside you. Now look to your right. It's rocky. It's uphill. You don't know exactly where it leads. Very few people are willing to take it. Now, here's the question. Which path do you think changes you? Not which one feels better. Which one makes you become someone different? Because here's something society rarely tells you. Growth and comfort are almost never roommates. They might wave at each other from across the street, but they don't live in the same house. We've been sold a definition of happiness that isn't serving us. Many people believe happiness comes from eliminating discomfort. If I just make more money, if I just lose the weight, if I just find the right relationship, if I just retire, then I'll finally be happy. But psychologists have spent decades studying something called hedonic adaptation. Here's what that means in plain English. Human beings are incredibly good at getting used to good things. You buy the new car. 6 months later, it's just your car. You get the promotion. A few months later, it's your normal job. You move into the dream house. Before long, it becomes your everyday house. Researchers have found that we quickly adapt to improvements in our circumstances and often return toward our previous baseline level of satisfaction. Think about that. If comfort actually created lasting happiness, why do so many people who have everything still feel empty? Because the human brain wasn't designed to find fulfillment through comfort alone. It was designed to adapt. And when adaptation stops, meaning often begins to disappear. Imagine someone who never uses their muscles. Year after year. What happens? They don't stay the same. They get weaker. Now apply that to your brain. If you never challenge it, never ask it to solve difficult problems, never expose yourself to uncertainty, never learn new skills, why would you expect it to grow stronger? One of the leading researchers on the brain, Dr. Wendy Suzuki, has spent years showing how movement and learning stimulate changes in the brain that support memory, attention, and cognitive function. In other words, your brain likes being challenged, not because it feels good in the moment, because challenge tells your brain we need to become more capable. Comfort tells your brain we're fine exactly where we are. Those are two very different messages. Look around. Everything is becoming easier. Food, transportation, communication, shopping, entertainment, artificial intelligence, automation. Convenience itself isn't evil. Let's be clear about that. Technology has improved lives in incredible ways. The problem isn't convenience. The problem is when convenience becomes your default response to every challenge. Think about how often we're encouraged to remove friction. One-click checkout, instant delivery, same-day shipping, skip the line, no waiting, no effort, no discomfort. Now ask yourself, what happens to a generation that rarely has to wait, that rarely has to struggle, that rarely has to be bored, that rarely has to sit alone with their own thoughts? We become less tolerant of discomfort, and if our tolerance for discomfort shrinks, our capacity for growth often shrinks with it. This one surprised me when I first started studying performance psychology. Most people run from boredom. The second they stand in line, they reach for their phone. The second they're waiting at a doctor's office, phone. 5 minutes in the grocery store, phone. But boredom serves a purpose. Moments without constant stimulation allow the brain to wander, reflect, and make new connections. Many creative breakthroughs don't happen while you're consuming information. They happen when our brains finally have space to think. Ask yourself, when was the last time you drove somewhere without music, a podcast, or your phone? When was the last time you simply sat outside? When was the last time you allowed yourself to think instead of consume? Sometimes the breakthrough you're praying for isn't hiding in another motivational video. It's waiting in the silence you're avoiding. I want to tell you something that changed my life. Every single decision you make casts a vote, not just for what you'll do tomorrow, but for who you'll become. When you choose to keep your word, you're voting to become trustworthy. When you choose discipline, you're voting to become disciplined. When you choose comfort over purpose, you're voting for that identity too. This is where many people get stuck. They think identity changes first. It doesn't. Behavior changes first. Identity follows. That's why someone who has never exercised doesn't wake up one day thinking, I'm an athlete. They become an athlete because they repeatedly act like one. One workout, one meal, one decision, one promise kept. One difficult day where they refuse to quit. Identity is earned through repetition, not declared through motivation. Can I tell you what I think is one of the most dangerous sentences in the English language? It's, this is just who I am. No, that's who you've practiced being. There's a huge difference, because if identity is built through repeated action, then identity can also be rebuilt through repeated action. Your past doesn't have to become your permanent address. Your habits have shaped your identity, which means new habits can reshape it. That's one of the most powerful discoveries in neuroscience. The brain remains capable of change throughout life, not overnight, not without effort, but with consistent practice. That means you're never too old to become stronger, never too late to become healthier, never too broken to become disciplined, never too far gone to rebuild your life. Warriors, this should fill you with hope, because it means your future is not trapped inside your past. If you're listening today and you're tired, not physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I want you to hear this. You don't need to become a different person tomorrow. You don't need to completely change your life before breakfast. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to choose one uncomfortable thing today that your future self will thank you for. One. That's how mountains are climbed. One step. That's how businesses are built. One decision. That's how marriages are restored. One conversation. That's how confidence grows. One kept promise. And that's how warriors are made. Not in moments of comfort, but in moments where they decide, I'm going anyways. Hey friends, it's your favorite drill sergeant Jay. If today's episode has you thinking differently about your life, imagine what would happen if you improved one habit that impacts everything else, your sleep. That's why I want to share with you Naturepedic. We spend nearly 1/3 of our lives in bed, and the quality of your mattress and bedding directly affects your recovery, your energy, and your ability to show up for the people who need you most. If you're serious about building a stronger body, a sharper mind, and a more resilient life, don't overlook the place where recovery begins. Visit naturepedic.com. Now, let's get back to today's episode. Now, we're about to answer the question everyone asks. If comfort is holding us back, how do we retrain our brain to actually embrace discomfort instead of avoiding it? That's exactly where we're headed in part 2. And I promise you, the next section may completely change the way you look at fear, confidence, and your own potential. Hi friends, let's dive into part 2. Welcome back. I want to start this half of the episode with a question. What if the very thing you've been trying to avoid is the thing that's been trying to build you? Think about that. Most of us spending our lives asking, how do I make this easier? But the people who change industries, build great companies, raise resilient families, and lead through adversity ask a different question. What is this challenge trying to teach me? That shift in perspective changes everything. Not because the challenge disappears, but because you begin to change. Picture a blacksmith forging a sword. The steel doesn't become stronger because it sat on a shelf. It becomes stronger because it was exposed to heat, pressure, and repeated refinement. Your brain works in much that same way. When you're challenged but not overwhelmed, your brain is forced to adapt. It strengthens the neural pathways needed to solve problems, regulate emotions, and perform under pressure. Over time, those adaptations make difficult situations feel more manageable. That's one reason elite military units, world-class athletes, and high-performing leaders don't avoid challenge. They understand that repeated exposure to manageable stress builds capacity. The same principle applies outside the military. Every difficult presentation, every hard conversation, every workout you almost skipped, every business risk you carefully chose to take, those moments become training reps for your brain. Let's be honest. Avoidance feels amazing for about 5 minutes. You put off the phone call, instant relief. You skip the workout, instant relief. You delay working on your business, instant relief. But here's the catch. That relief is temporary. The challenge is still waiting. Only now it's often bigger than it was before. Avoidance trades today's discomfort for tomorrow's burden. Discipline does the opposite. It accepts today's effort to create tomorrow's freedom. Every decision is making one of those trades. The question is, which future are you buying? I want to share something I call the Warrior Brain Framework. It's built around 3 simple questions I ask myself when I feel resistance. The first one, am I protecting myself or am I protecting my comfort? Those are not the same thing. Protecting yourself from genuine danger is wisdom. Protecting yourself from temporary discomfort often keeps you stuck. The next question, will this matter a year from now? Most of the things we fear, an awkward conversation, trying something new, being a beginner, won't matter nearly as much as we imagine. And the last, who do I become if I do this anyway? That's the question that shifts your focus from the immediate feeling to the long-term identity you're building. Because every courageous action casts a vote for the person you're becoming. People often look at resilient individuals and assume they were born that way. The evidence suggests otherwise. Resilience is developed through experience. It's strengthened by recovering from setbacks, learning from failure, and continuing to move forward despite uncertainty. Think about your own life. If you've survived loss, heartbreak, military service, divorce, financial hardship, illness, you've already demonstrated resilience. The goal isn't to prove you're strong. The goal is to remember that you are. Sometimes we forget because comfort has convinced us to stop using that strength. But strength doesn't disappear. It waits to be called upon. Here's one of the biggest myths holding people back. I'll do it when I feel confident. No. Confidence follows evidence, and evidence comes from action. You don't become confident by waiting. You become confident by collecting small wins. 1 completed workout, 1 difficult conversation, 1 application submitted, 1 chapter written, 1 podcast recorded. Each action tells your brain, I can do hard things. And every time your brain receives that message, it becomes a little easier to believe it the next time. Confidence isn't magic. It's memory. It's your brain remembering that you faced discomfort before and made it through. In the next segment, we're going to make this practical. I'm going to give you 3 neuroscience-backed habits that you can begin today. No expensive equipment, no perfect schedule, no waiting until Monday. These are simple actions that help train your brain to become more resilient, more disciplined, and less dependent on comfort. Because knowledge changes nothing. Applied knowledge changes everything. All right, friends, we've spent pretty much this entire episode up until this point talking about what comfort does to your brain. Now, let's talk about what you can do about it. Because information without implementation is entertainment. I don't want you walking away from this episode saying, wow, that was interesting. I want you walking away saying, I'm different because of what I've heard. So I'm going to give you 3 strategies that are backed by neuroscience and performance psychology. They're simple enough to begin today, but powerful enough to change the trajectory of your life if you practice them consistently. Notice I didn't say perfectly. I said consistently, because perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. Here's the first challenge. Every single day, choose one thing that makes you slightly uncomfortable. Not dangerous, not reckless, just uncomfortable enough that your brain wants to avoid it. Maybe it's introducing yourself to someone new, making the phone call you've been putting off, going for a walk when you'd rather stay on the couch, recording your first video, applying for the promotion, having the difficult conversation you've been rehearsing in your head for weeks. Why does this matter? Because every time you voluntarily lean into manageable discomfort, you're teaching your brain something powerful. I can survive this. Over time, your nervous system becomes less reactive and more adaptable. The situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel familiar, not because they've changed, but because you have. Here's what I want you to remember. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. The goal is to stop letting fear make your decisions. Now, let me ask you something. If your best friend constantly broke promises to you, would you trust them? Probably not. So, why do we expect to trust ourselves after repeatedly breaking promises to ourselves? I'll start Monday. I'll wake up early tomorrow. I'll stop procrastinating. I'll work out after work. And then tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Eventually, your brain begins to expect that your words don't lead to action. That's not an identity problem. That's a trust problem. Today, I want you to make one promise, so small that there's almost no excuse not to keep it. Drink 1 extra glass of water. Read 5 pages. Walk for 10 minutes. Write 1 paragraph. Stretch for 5 minutes. When you keep that promise, your brain receives evidence. Belief builds confidence. Confidence builds identity. Small promises, consistently kept, become the foundation of extraordinary lives. Before your head hits the pillow tonight, I want you to ask yourself one simple question. Where did I choose comfort over growth today? Don't ask it to shame yourself. Ask it to learn. Maybe you avoided speaking up in a meeting. Maybe you hit snooze 3 times. Maybe you spent an hour scrolling when you planned to work on your goals. Notice it. Own it. Then ask a second question. What will I do differently tomorrow? That's how growth happens. Not by pretending you're perfect, by becoming more aware. Awareness creates choice. Choice creates change. Change creates transformation. Here's what most people underestimate. They underestimate the power of one decision. One workout doesn't transform your body. One book doesn't make you wise. One healthy meal doesn't change your health. One difficult conversation doesn't transform your relationships. But thousands of those decisions, they change everything. Success is rarely one giant leap. It's usually 1,000 invisible steps that nobody applauds. The world celebrates the championship. It rarely notices the early mornings, the sacrifices, the repetitions, the lonely seasons, the uncomfortable moments when nobody was watching. That's where greatness is built, not under the spotlight, but in the quiet moments where you choose discipline over comfort. Now, I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself 10 years from now. What does that version of you look like? How do they walk? How do they think? How do they lead? How do they love? How do they take care of their body? Now ask yourself this. What decisions would that future version of me make today? Because every choice you make is either introducing you to that person or moving you further away from them. Your future isn't created someday. It's being built today. One decision at a time. One habit at a time. One uncomfortable moment at a time. And every single time you choose purpose over comfort, you're casting another vote for the person you're becoming. Friends, we're almost at the end of today's episode. In our final segment, I'm going to leave you with one message I hope you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. Because comfort isn't the enemy. It's simply a place you're never meant to live. I'll also tell you how you can continue this journey with me inside the Warriors Haven community and share what's coming up next for the upcoming book. Don't go anywhere. We'll finish strong. All right, friends, before we wrap up today's episode, I want you to hear this, not with your ears, but with your heart. There will come a day when you'll look back on your life. You won't remember every email you answered. You won't remember every television show you watched. You won't remember every hour you spent scrolling on your phone, but you will remember the moments that required courage. You'll remember the day you finally started taking care of your health. You'll remember the day you walked into the gym even though you were embarrassed. You'll remember the day you stood up for yourself. You'll remember the day you forgave someone. You'll remember the day you left the job that was stealing your peace. You'll remember the day you launched the business. You'll remember the day you decided your past would no longer dictate your future. Because those are the moments that shape a life. Not the comfortable ones, the courageous ones. I want to make something very clear. I'm not telling you that rest is bad. Rest is essential. Recovery is essential. Sleep is essential. Time with your family is essential. Laughter is essential. The goal isn't to eliminate comfort. The goal is to stop making comfort your compass. Rest should prepare you for your mission. It should never replace your mission. A comfortable evening after a productive day is recovery. A comfortable life built on avoidance is something entirely different. Know the difference. Tomorrow morning, I want you to stand in front of the mirror. Before you check your phone, before you turn on the news, before you open social media, look yourself in the eyes, then ask one question. What would make me proud of myself today? Not what would make today easier. Not what do I feel like doing? Ask yourself, What would earn my own respect? Because when you begin chasing self-respect instead of temporary comfort, your entire life starts to change. Self-respect cannot be bought. It cannot be downloaded. It cannot be borrowed from someone else. It is earned, one disciplined decision at a time. As a retired drill sergeant, I've learned something that has stayed with me long after I hung up the uniform. People are always watching. Your children are watching. Your coworkers are watching. Your spouse is watching. Your friends are watching. But the person who watches you the most is you. Every single decision becomes evidence. Evidence for the story you believe about yourself. If you constantly quit when things get difficult, your brain collects evidence that quitting is who you are. But every time you finish what you started, every time you choose discipline over distraction, every time you keep your word, your brain collects different evidence. It begins building a new identity, one rooted in integrity, one rooted in courage, one rooted in resilience. And eventually, you stop saying, I'm trying to become disciplined. Because one day, you'll wake up and realize you are. So for the next 7 days, I want you to do something simple. Every morning, write down one uncomfortable action that moves your life forward. Just one, not 10, one. Then complete it before the day ends. At night, ask yourself, did I let comfort make my decisions today? Or did I? If you complete that challenge for 7 straight days, I promise you'll begin noticing something. Not because your life will magically become easier, but because you're becoming stronger. And stronger people don't need easier lives. They become capable of handling harder ones. If today's episode challenged the way you think, then I want to personally invite you to join us inside the Warriors Haven Inner Circle on School. That community isn't about chasing motivation. It's about building discipline. It's about surrounding yourself with people who refuse to settle for average. Inside, you'll find weekly challenges, practical tools, accountability, and a community of warriors committed to becoming stronger in their health, their mindset, their leadership, and their purpose. Because transformation doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in community. So join us on school.com. That's SKOOL.com. And search for the Warriors Haven Inner Circle. You'll find us. And if this episode resonated with you, you're going to love what's coming next. My upcoming book goes even deeper into rebuilding your identity after life's hardest battles. Whether you're a veteran, an entrepreneur, a parent, someone navigating a major life transition, or simply someone who's tired of living below your potential, this book was written for you. It's not just about discipline. It's about reclaiming the person you were created to become. If you'd like to be among the first to know when it's released, join the waitlist through the link that I'll also have in the show notes. But you can also visit thewarriorshavenbook.com. I can't wait to put it in your hands. Friends, the world will continue selling comfort. It will tell you that easy is better, that convenience is success, that avoiding difficulty is wisdom. But now you know better. Comfort isn't the destination. Growth is. Purpose is. Service is. Character is. So the next time life presents you with 2 choices, the comfortable choice or the courageous one, I hope you remember this episode. I hope you remember that every difficult decision is an opportunity to become someone your future self will thank you for. Because your life isn't shaped by the moments when everything feels easy. It's shaped by the moments when you choose to keep moving anyway. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode encouraged you, challenged you, or made you think differently, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Share this episode with one person who needs to hear this message today. You never know how one conversation can change the course of someone's life. Until next time, I'm your favorite Drill Sergeant Jay, and remember, stay strong, stay focused, stay ready. Hi, friend. Thanks for tuning into the Warriors Haven podcast, where we turn discipline into freedom and help you build the body, mindset, and lifestyle you deserve. If today's episode fired you up or gave you just that little push you needed, don't stop here. Head on over to thewarriorshaven.com, where you'll find details on how to jumpstart the next version of you. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up for yourself every single day. So until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and stay ready. I'm Jaisha Sutherland, and you're listening to the Warriors Haven podcast.